So my name is Tim Jackman. I am the Vice President of Communications at the American Junior Golf Association.
Right. And my name is Thomas Harrison. I am the Director of Tournament Operations at the American Junior Golf Association.
When the idea of the Golf's Next Gen podcast was introduced and kind of how long that took to get the ball rolling on that.
Yeah, I'll start with this one. I think to be honest, we've talked about it for I've been at the AJGA for 10, almost 11 years now, and we probably talked about it for at least 5 or 6 of those. It was just a long time that we talked about it, but we like to get things into a position where they're almost perfect before we launch them, and that can kind of be a little bit difficult sometimes. So I think that was kind of the similar with what happened with this. We talked about it for a long time, but never really kind of got it there, and we finally decided, you know what, this is really something that is exploding even over the last 5 years. Especially, I think the pandemic really furthered that even more. But podcasting and just getting information to people in that way. And we decided, you know what, we just need to do it, and we just need to step out there and give it our best shot. And know it's not going to be perfect. And there's going to be stuff that we're going to improve on. And I think if you look at our first episode to our second episode and beyond, it's just gotten so much better with each episode. And that was kind of something we realized was we just need to start this. And so we kind of started it with the idea of getting information in front of members and kind of evolved it a little bit into, having some fun with it and not making it just strictly informational, but also, working in some of that kind of fun aspect and making it a little bit entertaining. And if we can get some of that info across while also being slightly entertaining, while also being not too cringe, then I think we're going to be in a good spot.
Right on, absolutely. And then Thomas, do you have anything that you want to add to that?
No, I would just say, like Tim mentioned, it was really something where I think the best thing for us was just committing to getting this thing off the ground. And like I said, just seeing what kind of stuck for us was huge. The improvements, we do episode 1 and we looked at it and thought, I don't think anyone's going to look at this and think it's this mind blowing. We just changed the game of golf podcasting, but it's definitely something where we have an opportunity to continue to grow, and we've really progressed and made it so it's getting much more enjoyable as it goes on. Just for the listeners, I think they're going to keep seeing the progress and really, really get the chance to see where this thing goes.
If you could give some insights into the format and structure and kind of where you guys see that going and what the focuses will include, whether that's interviews with players, coaches, other industry professionals, just kind of what that format will look like in the coming months.
Yeah, so initially we've stuck pretty firm to our current structure of, obviously we go through the current events in golf we got started right around Masters time. So that was obviously a big topic for us, and talking about our alumni who are playing in the Masters and playing on the LPGA. So we like to stick to those current events, kind of tie that into the AJGA. We see where our past members, our alums are, and what they're currently doing. And then the main focus, what we've done so far, is interviewing current AJGA juniors. We've been fortunate to interview some highly ranked juniors so far and really let them give the opportunity to kind of introduce themselves to the world, let people get to know them on a more personal level. But also get some of that insight into what makes them those top junior golfers, and hopefully provide that insight into other juniors who are listening, just getting started out. What makes the Yana Wilsons of the AJGA, the Yana Wilsons, these up and coming superstars who have gone and competed against professionals and competed well. So really focusing on that right now. And then we've also been fortunate enough, our executive director, Stephen Hamblin, has obviously been here since day one. And so he's gotten the chance to interact with a lot of those alums when they were juniors. He's able to talk about, I remember Tiger as a junior. He remembers Annika getting involved with the AJGA. And so you can kind of hear that insight into those players 20, 30 years ago. So it's an opportunity to not only look at our current juniors, but take a step back and look at a little bit of the history and some things that people may not have realized. You just think of, we know Tiger Woods as this amazing professional golfer, but you get a little peek into who he was as a junior as well. So something cool for us. But as we move forward, we're really interested in expanding those interviews. Is I think the main focus for us. As much as we think people would love to just listen to Tim and I talk, that's not why they're tuning in. They're tuning in to listen to the next generation. But we're really looking forward to expanding that to some of our alumni and hearing from those professionals, hearing from collegiate coaches, and giving people an insight into different aspects of whether it be the recruiting process, the mental game, just things that you wish you knew as a junior golfer. Maybe if you've gone through the process, you wish you knew at the time, or stuff as you're going through that process now, you're really looking forward to getting an insight on, and what can give you that edge as you move forward.
Right on. That was a super great answer. Tim, do you have anything that you want to add to that one?
Just real briefly, because Thomas did such an eloquent job. I think we obviously want to focus, and we really thought out of the gate, we wanted to make sure that this was about the juniors. The juniors were on it, and it was all about the juniors. But as we kind of get that established, and because that's who we are, we wanted to expand that. And we certainly have some great connections with some of our partners within the industry and our professionals, and also the college coaches, like Thomas said. So really wanted to focus on those juniors out of the gate, and then kind of move on beyond that. But it's always going to have a junior focus, and it's always going to have the focus on how can our juniors who are listening to this really gain insight into making themselves better.
I just kind of want to ask if there's any insights on some behind the scenes that you could share with us on what goes into every single episode.
Yeah, it's kind of funny. We did the first episode in like our gallery hallway we have, and we were like, you know what, this is a good idea in theory, but it kind of feels a little dated. So then we immediately changed it up and went completely different. So we now do it in our conference room, and we have a big TV on the wall so we can show like a graphic or photos of the player we're talking to. We also, just it's a lot about doing the little things too. We have some sound dampening curtains we put up, and we have multiple camera angles to give us more options, and we have just making sure you're buying microphones that are specific to podcasting. Like, they don't even have to be expensive ones, but just things that are very specific from that standpoint. And just knowing that things are going to go wrong at some point. Like, you're never going to be in a situation where every single episode is going to be absolutely perfect and everything's going to be great across the board. There's going to be situations where a microphone messes up or something along those lines. You just have to know that that's going to happen and do the best that you can with it. We have a producer who works with us who's on my staff, and he's really awesome. He's really, really into the podcast, and he does a great job. A shout out Justin. But I think that's also helpful too, is to have somebody kind of managing all this, so you're not just trying to juggle everything and bringing people on board. And I think the thing that's made us better and better is just being open to feedback. Sometimes it's easy to just do what you're doing and think that's the greatest ever, but if you're willing to be open to feedback, and that's a lot of what the AJGA is just in general. We're very open to feedback and are always looking to make things better. So that's a big deal for us as well.
Right on. Perfect answer. Thomas, do you have anything you want to add into that one?
Yeah, I think going back to just seeing what works was the trial and error for us. And as Tim mentioned, just being open to feedback was huge. And just the fact that it'd be very easy to start this up and think, oh, we nailed that, it was perfect, we're just going to stick to what we did. But the first thing we did afterwards was just reach out to everybody and say, okay, what are your thoughts? Not even just within our organization, but reaching out to some juniors that we have good relationships with, reaching out to some of our sponsors and other people that we know would have checked it out and just thought, what would you like to see and how can we improve this? And so that, even just from the tech side, some of it was, maybe the audio wasn't great here, or I know the backdrop was something big, and we spent a lot of time trying to figure out how to make that look more modern. And the gallery it's a very cool spot to go through, but it is more so a museum than a podcast studio. So again, just the trial and error, finding what works, finding the proper equipment and everything, it's done a lot for us just in the few short episodes that we've done.
Gonna kind of shift gears a little bit here. And so I know both of you said big focus on the junior golfers. That's the focus here. But I just wanted to ask if there's any like special topics that you guys are looking to include in these podcasts, just that we can kind of look forward to.
I think, as we look at it, we want to try to incorporate, and we want to talk about what the AJGA is doing within the industry at the same time that we're working in, talking to these juniors and providing that information to people. So it's a great opportunity for us to take someone like, for example, Miles Russell. We're kind of hoping to get him lined up on the podcast here shortly, but he started with our Junior All-Star Series. So it's a great opportunity to talk about that Junior All-Star Series and how these, 12 to 15-year-old events are a great way to start your career. He played in a couple of those, won a few, ended up winning an invitation, and became our Rolex Junior Player of the Year. Then obviously this year he's done phenomenal things on the Corn Ferry Tour and things like that. So we will find those opportunities to talk about programs or things the AJGA is doing within the framework of talking to these juniors and figuring out, learning about them. We've got a guest coming up at some point this summer who he had this crazy circumstance happen where he had a heart issue on the golf course at one of our events. And he ended up having to be in the hospital for 7 weeks, not moving, not exerting himself, but he didn't just sit there. He used that as a time to fundraise and raise $30,000 for charity while he was just in the hospital. And he's in our Leadership Links program. So that's a perfect opportunity for us to talk about his story and these incredible things that he's doing, but at the same time also say, we have this Leadership Links program, and this is what we're doing. And there's other things like fee reduction and things along those lines that we're going to try to incorporate. So I think when it comes to specific themes, it's really just going to depend on the junior that we're talking to, but we're always going to try to find ways to kind of work that in. And as we start expanding into things like coaches or into the industry professionals, there's going to be opportunities to talk about like mental game. And there's going to be opportunities to talk about, financial assistance. And there's going to be chances to talk about all of those things, again, within that framework of talking to these juniors and industry professionals as it relates to junior golf specifically.
If there's any like teasers that you could give us on upcoming episodes, do you have anything else similar that you're kind of planning to highlight, or any guests that you're kind of trying to get on aside from the ones you mentioned?
Yeah, obviously he just mentioned Miles Russell, someone we're fortunate to have a good relationship with, but it was kind of interesting at first when we started reaching out to some of the juniors, and a lot of them were just kind of interested to see what it looked like. But then after the first couple episodes have been out and they've seen it, we've had juniors reaching out to us just saying like, hey, I'd love to be on the podcast if you get the opportunity, and I'd love to be with so-and-so on the podcast. So I know I mentioned it earlier, but we have Yana Wilson lined up. She'll be in the interview for our next episode that will be out here in the coming weeks. And so very interesting to see her story as another one who's played AJGA for several years and has had the opportunity to play on the Epson Tour. She's played in LPGA majors. She's really kind of done it all at such a young age. So very cool to get those opportunities. But like we mentioned a little earlier, just really looking to see some of those alumni that we have. They're just great stories. And something that's been a big theme for us was obviously, again, right around the launch was when Nick Dunlap he had won the Amex. He was kind of coming onto the scene. And so he was playing with us less than 2 years ago. And so that's been something where we've gotten the chance we'd love to have him on eventually and kind of talk about that process, one of our players of the year. But something that he kind of brought to the forefront for us and has gotten a little bit of media attention is just the fact that he's playing with Rolex Players of the Year on PGA Tour from 20 years ago. That we just have this new generation coming in that still has these AJGA ties. So certainly hoping to get some of those people that just have the ties. And again, there's just so many great stories out there, like Tim alluded to. And I think one of the cooler parts for me personally is just getting the chance to let these juniors and people kind of tell their story and get some of their personality out there. Because I think oftentimes golf is a game where maybe you don't get to see a ton of personality while you're watching them play. It's very kind of locked in, just dialed on what you're doing. And so you get to see these personalities, you get to see them smile and laugh and tell these stories that you never would have known. So just getting the chance to get those future golfers. I mentioned Yana coming up. We had the opportunity to get very close with Billy Davis over the years. He's very excited to come on. We'll have him in coming episodes. And like you mentioned, the Miles Russells, the Nick Dunlaps, just all people we're very excited to hopefully get involved here soon. And just let people connect with a little bit more on a personal level.
Awesome. Yeah, it sounds like you guys have your handful. Sounds like it's off
Yeah,
to
wish we could wish we had the resources to do it in an episode a week, because there's so many opportunities to do stuff. So hopefully we can kind of ramp it up a little bit more in the summertime when we've got a little bit more resources to put behind it. But yeah, there's a lot of people out there who want to be on it, or we kind of want to have on it. We've got quite the list. It's growing.
I know we kind of talked, I think Thomas, when you were fixing your video situation, mentioned that you're looking at doing once a month right now. And then, so if you kind of grow this, and obviously you said you had those resources to be pushing more out, are you hoping to produce them more often, just like during off season, or kind of what do you guys think about that?
Yeah, I think it's probably ideally we're looking at probably bi-weekly, every other week releasing an episode. Right now it's all being handled in-house within my department, the communications department, all the editing and producing and all of that stuff. So obviously when we have tournaments going on, like right now we're, in the first week of our summer season, and that goes through August. So we're at the beginning of each season. Our summer and spring is a really busy time for us, and there are points in the fall where it's really busy as well. It's kind of difficult to put that much effort behind it, but we certainly are going to try to ramp that up over certain times of the summer when it's a little bit slower for the communications department. But ideally we would probably be bi-weekly just from a content standpoint, because I think that gives a good cadence and gives a good separation there. But you also have to be careful, which is another difficult thing, because you can't record them too far in advance, because then things that you start talking about become irrelevant, and that's something we've kind of run into, especially with this Yana Wilson episode that's going to be released, is that we had to record it because of the training events that Thomas and I were both going to in our schedules, and then so we're trying to figure out how to kind of fit that in and make it still very relevant, even if it was recorded 2 weeks ago or something along those lines. So that gets to be a little bit tricky, and you certainly have to be continually recording these versus being able to really bank like 4 or 5 different episodes.
You hit on just having good partnerships. I kind of wanted to ask if there were any partnerships or collaborations specifically with the podcast, or kind of just like what that relationship looks like.
I think with the podcast, it is something that we are looking to potentially bring a partner on board with. I think at the AJGA, over 60% of our operating budget is from sponsors, and we really do that because we want to try to keep the cost as low as we possibly can for the juniors, from an entry fee standpoint, from a membership fee standpoint. And we've actually worked over the last 3 years to reduce fees across the board at our events, and we're going to continue to do that over the next 3 to 5 years. And so because of that, we ramp up from a sponsorship standpoint. So we're very fortunate with our global partners, TaylorMade and Adidas. And so we are working to get the podcast sponsored, if you will, and bring a partner on board with it. I don't know that we would necessarily get to the point where we would do a bunch of commercials or things like that, because we do want it to feel very organic. But it certainly is an opportunity out there to be sponsored by pretty much anything in the golf industry. We're very flexible with the partners that we can work with, but that's something that is certainly on our, I don't want to say to-do list, but something we're looking into.
Right on. And then Thomas, did you want to add anything to that one, or?
No, really, just like Tim said,
Don't
we're
talk
very
about
fortunate.
Chili's, Thomas. Don't talk about Chili's.
Yeah, we had the joke, almost all of our episodes at some point come back to talking about food with the juniors. So Chili's has been a recurring theme. We've joked about getting a sponsorship there, but really, as Tim mentioned, it's certainly an opportunity and something that we're looking to do in the future. And we're certainly always on board. Obviously, our premier partner, Rolex, and like Tim mentioned, and Adidas and TaylorMade, our global partners, have done so much for us with the AJJ anyway. It's just, seeing maybe is this podcast kind of an added benefit to them as well, and see where we can kind of collaborate on that to make it beneficial for everyone.
I guess that brings us into the closing question. And I know you did kind of just hit on this a little bit of just saying, just do it. But what other recommendations or advice would you give to another association that's looking to get into the world of podcasting, and just the best method that you would use?
Yeah, obviously, you just touched on again is just trying it out, see what works for you. But I think for us, it was just seeing where we could really individualize it and not try to compare ourselves to other podcasts. Obviously, there's a lot of very successful sports podcasts, there's very successful golf podcasts, but where we got into it and looked was, we have this opportunity to be truly unique because of what we do and working with that next generation. We're working with people that haven't necessarily established themselves yet. And so we have the unique opportunity to kind of introduce some of those people to the world, but also benefit those members themselves and give them the opportunity to learn from some of those top golfers, or gain insight into things we're doing at the AJGA, different policies that are changing, things like that, different ways to get involved, get started in your career. And, if we can kind of spark something with one person on every episode, that's going to be beneficial. I know we've talked about some segments maybe for future episodes, where one of the segments we talked about was kind of sparked by conversations I've had with parents on site about, a player, somebody, just they don't have the best first tournament going. And that sparked the idea for me of, let's have a conversation about that. Let's look back and see how people who are very successful have done that. And so it just gives us the opportunity to look at how we can benefit people. So I think that would be my advice to anyone who's looking to get it started, was how can you not only benefit yourselves, what are your goals, but how can you benefit those listeners, and what can you provide to them? So it's not just the same thing as every other podcast. There's nothing wrong with trying to go out there and be unique. And if it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. You try something else and you keep moving on. That's still where we are, being as early into this podcast process as we are, but we've seen it grow, and we've seen how we can change and adapt over just a few episodes. So I'm really looking forward to see, down the line here at the end of a year, I think that growth is going to be astounding. And I think anyone else who start up a podcast would be able to say the same, if you just give it time and let it develop.
Right, absolutely. Well, that brings us to our close of questions. But I do want to ask the both of you, are there any other comments that you would like to make regarding these questions, or just anything else that about the podcast?
I think the only thing I would say is just to have fun with it, because I think that comes through when you're recording these. And I think Thomas and I have a pretty great relationship, and I think that kind of comes through in the podcast, hopefully. And that's something I think that is really important too, because if you're there and it's just dry and it's really, I mean, I'm not saying we're these great entertainers by any means, but at least we have a little bit of fun with it and we have some banter. And I think that's important, is just to have fun with it, find your niche, have fun with it, and you just see what happens, because it's going to get better and better. You're going to get more used to it. You're going to get more comfortable. You're going to get better ideas. And so just kind of just go with it and see what happens, because you really never know. And like Thomas said, we're still very much in the infancy of this. And we've already seen a lot of growth, and we've seen some cool things. And so we're very excited to see, where it goes. And so I really just encourage you, if you're thinking about doing it, just get out there and do it, and start it and see what happens, because you never know.
Right, absolutely. Well, that's a perfect close there. So I do want to say, before you guys leave, if you do sign Chili's, I would like to have a discount if that happens.
We'll see what we can do.
As a reminder, if your association would like to highlight a program or initiative, please reach out to me, Santana Shipley, at shipley@iaga.org.